welcome to St Mary's with Holy Apostles Facebook page. It seems rather strange that we can't meet together as we would normally do on Good Friday, but instead we've put together a series of reflections that are based on Stephen Cottrells' book The Nail, and they've been written by Jake. They're rather like a record of witnesses to that last week in Jesus' life. And the idea is that we will give you a screen with a Bible reading that you can pause to read and then resume the video when you are ready. You may like to take note of your feelings or your reactions to each reflection, almost as if you were there witnessing to the difficult events of that final week of Jesus' life. As we start this then, shall we pray? Lord, I thank you for the week of Holy Week. Thank you for your last days here on earth. Thank you for what you went through that week for us. Help us learn afresh how to treasure those reflections and grow through them and be transformed as we listen to people who had an influence and were influenced by your life. In Jesus' name, Amen.
It's normally my job to wash people's feet. It's not a fun job. Feet are smelly, sometimes dusty, sometimes even pooey. But yesterday I didn't have to. Instead, this man called Jesus, who was the most important person at the meal, came and asked me if he could borrow my jug, my bowl and my towel, and he washed his friends' feet. Instead, they were really shocked, but he said they should happily do their dusty jobs to show they love each other. Today is Friday and Mum says she's heard this Jesus has been arrested. I don't know what's happened to him. Perhaps others can tell you, but I really like him.
I guess you're all judging me right now. How could one of his closest followers, a guy who had walked with him, eaten with him, learned from him, let him down so badly? How could I turn my back on him? How could I deny that I even knew him? But before you start pointing the finger, let me ask you this. What would you have done if you were me? They were about to kill him. Do you think they'd have been kind to his followers? Gentle? What would you have done? Oh, it's easy to say you'd be so different from me. Standing back from it all, it's easy to say you wouldn't have denied him. But are you so sure? If it meant risking your own life, what would you do in that moment? So much had happened in those last few days. He'd washed our feet and told us to love one another. And then he confused us at the Passover meal by saying that the bread was his body and the wine was his blood. He even told us one of us was going to betray him. Judas left shortly after that, and Jesus didn't even try to stop him. I was indignant. I said they might all leave him, but I'd stay. I'd stick by him. How wrong I was. Last night after the meal, Jesus walked with us to the garden and asked us to stay awake. But we were tired and we were slept. And then they came. They came to arrest him. And we stood by as one of our own, Judas, betrayed him. Someone who'd lived and learned and laughed with us, betraying him with a kiss and handing him over to those who wanted to harm him. And Jesus did nothing. Jesus said nothing. He didn't fight back. He didn't call down the angels. I would have fought alongside him. I was up for it. I drew my sword. But he wasn't happy with that. And it was when he didn't resist capture, and he even stopped me from resisting, it was then I realised I just didn't understand him. Who was this man? This strange man who talked about drinking the cup the Father gave him. What cup? What Father? He talked so strangely sometimes. His words were always uncomfortable, unusual. Sometimes I had no idea who he was or what he was claiming. I did follow him. It was chaos. No one knew what to do. I followed at a distance, carefully, but my heart was sinking. I knew it was too late. Maybe I was a fool for believing things could be different. So when they asked if I knew him, I said no. I wasn't with him anymore. I didn't know him like I thought I did. And when they said he was with them, I said no. There's no them anymore. It's over. So why have I got such a nagging question burning inside me? Why, when he turned to look at me as he was being led away, when I was sitting by the fire after telling them I didn't know him, why did it frighten me so much? What did he see when he looked at me? A friend who denied knowing me? No, it was more than that. You see, I think he saw me for who I am. All my stupidity, my lies, my deceitfulness, my weakness, my faults. And yet still he loved me. I said I'd stand by him, and he knew I'd deny him. And yet still he loved me nevertheless. I don't understand this love. It doesn't make sense to me. So if you think you're so much better than me, if you think you'd have acted differently, don't be so sure. He was arrested, taken away, bound, flogged, spat on, nailed down, and hung on a cross. And we did nothing. Zilch. And I couldn't even admit that I'd known him. We saved our skins in that moment. Wouldn't you have saved yours? Nails piercing your hands. Wouldn't you have done anything to avoid that? I don't like it, but it happened. He was nailed to the tree. That's it. It's finished now.
I was just doing my job. I was just doing my job. I was just doing my job. I was just doing my job.
The Roman soldier. Work is work is work. Some people farm the land to make a living. Some people build things. I kill people. I'm a soldier. I was just doing my job. Mind you, this wasn't quite like any ordinary crucifixion. This Jesus chap made quite a stir a week ago when he turned up in Jerusalem. The Passover festival is a tense time for us Romans. The Jews celebrate escaping from Egypt long ago. Our rulers are always worried that someone is going to decide they are the next Moses and we are the Egyptians. But things changed very fast in 1 week. The crowds were cheering for Jesus when he arrived in Jerusalem, but it seems that his own leaders had it in for him. I admired the bloke in some ways. He was a great leader. People hung on his every word, and even in his death he was calm and collected. I've seen all sorts go to the cross. Some sob uncontrollably, some scream in fear. Some are angry, but he was calm, collected, and even forgiving. Some of the lads tried to provoke him, dressing him up as a king and pretending to bow down to him. But he didn't rise to it, and the oddest thing is that looking into his eyes, he didn't even seem resentful. No protest at the injustice. It wasn't exactly a fair trial. Pilate clearly wanted to execute Barabbas and release Jesus, but he was weak. He gave in to pressure. Yet Jesus didn't protest. His face still haunts me. As I say, I have executed my fair share of criminals. I don't tend to concern myself with the politics. Some of them deserved it, others were probably stitched up, but this Jesus I will always remember, the lack of malice in his look. He didn't even rise to it when the other criminals taunted him. Work is work is work. I was just doing my job, but this execution was different, and I can't get him out of my mind. The King of the Jews, Jesus of Nazareth, we killed him. Who was this man?
3, 2, 1.
I won this cloak when we rolled the dice, and it was this fancy one. That Jesus bloke didn't shout at us like the others sometimes do. He even said the weirdest things. Father, forgive them, for they do not know what they were doing. Who was he talking to? Strange guy.
This hasn't got anything to do with me anymore. I've washed my hands of the whole thing. Stop pointing your finger at me. I was a politician making a difficult decision under difficult circumstances. I actually admired the man. He had steely coolness and calm in the face of the anger and accusations, but in the end there was no other way I could save him. I tried to give him a way out, but he wouldn't answer my questions. My wife warned me to have nothing to do with him, but the crowd wanted him dead. Again and again, crucify him, they said. What else could I have done? Sometimes politicians have had to make a hard call. That was what I had to do. Even his friends turned on him in the end. So you can't blame me for only carrying out the sentences the others had set up for him.
Well, I suppose this is something of a defence. Yes, in all this I did some things that I'm not proud of, but he had it coming to him, really. Back when I first met Jesus of Nazareth, I thought he was the man. There's only so long you can tolerate your people, your nation just being kicked around by everyone. We've had it from all of them, from the Babylonians, then the Persians, then the Greeks, and now the Romans. One repeated kick in the teeth. You wouldn't believe, to see our recent track record, that our God was supposed to be king of the universe. And then along came this Jesus, preaching about this kingdom that is here. God is already on the throne, he said. And I followed him, believing that meant that Rome's days were over. Bye-bye, Caesar. No more Roman soldiers turning up and scaring your family and stealing your food. He stood up to the religious leaders too.
Our leaders in Jerusalem have been in the pocket of Caesar and Rome, cozying up to King Herod for years, and Jesus called them out. I was there the day he rode into Jerusalem like a king. He went into the temple and turned everything over like a madman, with a whip, turning out the money changers who were extorting people. But there were just a few things that made me a little bit uncomfortable. I was in charge of the money, and I have to admit I did make sure that I would be okay if things all fell apart. There were just a few little things that he said that, I wasn't so sure about. He talked like the Messiah, like this king who we're expecting to come and lead us to victory against our enemies. But then sometimes he sounded like he thought he was, more than that. God or something. And it was in moments like that that made me wonder if I should have an insurance policy. Something to just make sure that I would be okay if all this didn't pan out. It's what anyone in my position would have done if they'd had the money bag, just skimming a little bit off the top just to make sure, I would be okay. But it wasn't just the God stuff that made me a bit sceptical sometimes. This Jesus seemed to have a thing for weakness. Something against fighting. Now I think about it, it was there all along in his stories. He said some things about a seed falling to the ground and dying. And then, sometimes he said even clearer things about going up to Jerusalem and dying, being killed. But, it wasn't until that night in the upper room that I realised he was serious about all this stuff. At the Passover meal, something in me snapped. All that stuff he'd said about sacrifice, about dying, about ransom. It seemed like actually this wasn't going to be a great victorious battle, as I thought. I wonder if he saw the thoughts behind my eyes. He said plainly, "One of you will betray me." And that was the moment. But see this from my side, I wasn't really betraying him. He'd misled me. We'd given up our lives to follow him. And now, how was this going to pan out? Not how I expected. Not in some glorious battle where we might be victorious. Not even, dying, fighting for our freedom as martyrs. But on some pathetic Roman cross. Some pathetic torture tree. So I went out from that meal and I went to the religious leaders. They were looking for a way to catch him. And it was as easy, or so I thought, as telling them just where to find him. It wasn't quite that easy though. I had to go with them, I had to point him out to them, I even had to greet him with a kiss, which is the one part I'm not proud of. But he got what he was aiming for, a pointless death. And I know you're looking to me as the scapegoat, the one to blame. But would you have done any different? All your expectations of what this man was going to be dashed. You were the ones shouting "Crucify" when Pilate seemed to want to release him. You've heard from the others, I'm not the only one here to blame. I'm not the one who abandoned him after boasting that I would be faithful to him. I can justify what I've done, even though it doesn't leave me feeling good. It leaves me feeling empty and cold inside.
Some people are dreamers and others are not. Some people are tormented by their dreams while they sleep, but when they wake up, those dreams quickly become insignificant. Others have come to believe by experience that their dreams are a window into reality, something that should be taken notice of. My husband isn't someone to take notice of dreams. He certainly has dreams. I hear him groaning, mumbling, even pronouncing judgments in his sleep. but he doesn't act upon these dreams. He is hardly likely to talk about them. I, however, believe that dreams matter. Perhaps they are a way of God speaking to our subconscious minds. In the last week, I've been tormented by a dream about a man who was more innocent than anyone else in history, and yet who was condemned. Tarred by all of the world as guilty, made the ultimate scapegoat. His face was ever obscured in my dream. Who is this man? I do not concern myself with news or politics. I do not know Jesus of Nazareth. But the day he arrived in Jerusalem, no one could help hearing the rumours that some great religious figure has arrived. My husband was nervously occupied with the whole thing, talking to his advisors, constantly receiving reports from his informers, weighing up this potential threat. But little did I know how much all of this had to do with my dreams. The dream kept reoccurring throughout the week. In my sleep, I was troubled with the innocence of this puzzling man. In my waking, I was perplexed by his elusive face. Who is he? On Thursday, I went to bed as usual with my husband by my side. I dreamed again the same dream, the innocent man. The innocent man, condemned by all of the world, yet with no face. But as the hours drew on towards the morning, it was like the fog had cleared from my eyes, his face revealed. At the same moment, it seemed like I was wrenched out of my sleep. My husband was being summoned to make a pronouncement on a man the Jewish leaders has arrested. Though I don't usually concern myself with such affairs, I found myself dressing and following my husband to the balcony, from which he would hear the matter. When I saw the accused man slumped between two soldiers, the face from my dream came back to me. The man accused, Jesus of Nazareth, the King of the Jews. He was innocent. He was the innocent man from my dream. Yet in my dream, he was condemned by all the world. Who were all the world? Were we about to be those to condemn him? I tried to warn my husband, have nothing to do with this man, but he would not listen. I tried again, have nothing to do with this man, leave him alone. Perhaps he was not able to listen, caught between a rock and a hard place. The pressure from the bloodthirsty crowd, the anger of the Jewish leaders. He tried to give them Barabbas instead. They wanted none of it. He washed his hands of the decision. The judgment pronounced, ruthlessly carried out, the soldiers come to announce he is dead. And now, there is no rest for me. The dream continues to haunt me. I think it haunts my husband too, though he won't talk about it. Pontius Pilate, his name, forever connected with the death of the most innocent one, the preacher from Nazareth, dead in the tomb, yet not forgotten.
They spat in his face. They spat in his face. The indignity of it makes me want to retch. They jeered and they laughed and they yelled abuse. Did they have no shame? Did they not know who this man was? We followed him as he dragged his cross up the hill. The sun scorched down on his weary, flayed flesh. Blood oozing from wounds so mercilessly inflicted. A crown made of thorns was jammed on his head, yet more blood trickled down. I wanted to turn away. I wanted to help. I wanted to cry out and scream at the injustice of it all. All I could do was follow. I watched as they hammered the nails through his hands, watched as they nailed his feet. I watched as the soldiers cast lots for his clothes, and I watched as he forgave people around him. I know earlier he let Judas go off to betray him. I know he had to stop Peter from attacking with his sword. I know he said nothing in his defence when Caiaphas and Pilate interrogated him. He let it happen. He acted like it was meant to be happening. Death isn't quick this way. Watching him stretched out on this cross. He's silent now. Time plays a funny trick at moments like this, seemingly stretching for eternity, and at the same time over in the blink of an eye. Most people have left now. They've had their fun, played their cruel part. But I need to wait. It's all I can do for the man who turned my life upside down. For the man who gave me my dignity back. It's all I can do for Jesus now. The one who showed me life matters. My life matters. He saw who I had the potential to be, and he showed me true love. As I look at him, twisted in agony on that horrid cross, he doesn't stop loving. He keeps on loving. Those who've denied him, those who've betrayed him, even the ones who've nailed him to this cross, he keeps loving to the end. People don't understand this kind of love. It's overwhelming. I don't understand this love. Who could love as this man loves? Everyone will be looking for someone to blame for this stupid waste of life, this assault on love, this killing of the man who showed me humanity, showed me God in a way I have never known God before. Everyone will be queuing up behind Pilate to wash their hands. But you see, I know who is to blame. I know it, and at the same time, I'm liberated by it. You see, it was me. I watched them put that cross on his shoulders. I watched them hammer the nails into his hands. And it was like I was doing it. I had the nails in my hand. I was holding them between my fingers and bringing the hammer down. You see, it was my stupidity, my pride, my envy, my spite that got in the way. That got it wrong, that put him up there, each one a nail hammered home. And I don't just mean me, but all the me's that make up a crowd, that make up a world. But I can only take responsibility for my part in that, and that is why I'm watching. That is why I'm still waiting. We didn't know what to do with a love like this, so we destroyed it. But as I look at him on that cross, I'm at the same time convicted and at the same time released. They've taken him down now. All I can see is an empty cross, the space where he has been. I can't see him anymore. But I know that his love went on, right through to the end, right through to the dying. Even when everything and everyone had rejected him, and he was alone in the last struggles of expiring life, there was love. And I don't know where that will lead for me, or what good it will do. But I see it now. It was for my sins that he hung and suffered there. And somehow, by the tenacity of his loving, I'm free to love again. So forgive me. Laugh at me if you want to, but I'm going to go on waiting. I'm going to go on trying to love. In a way, I want to put myself up on that cross, but I know I don't need to. He has done it for me. He's taken all the sins, all those nails, and he has borne them, consumed them, transformed them. That is what I've seen in his dying. And it makes me want to weep for grief that we could have been so stubbornly stupid, and for joy that a love such as this has visited our hearts. So please don't point the finger anymore, but wait with me. Imagine the nail in your hands. Receive this astonishing gift of tenacious love, all poured out in his dying, broken for me and broken for you.
Is it nothing to you, all who pass by? Look and see if there is any sorrow like my sorrow, which was brought upon me, which the Lord inflicted on the day of his fierce anger. These are words from the Old Testament book of Lamentations. Its ancient poetry laments the destruction of Jerusalem 600 years before Good Friday. And yet Christians have reflected that this passage speaks so singularly of Jesus hanging on that cross. Is it nothing to you, all who pass by, challenges us to consider that sad scene as we pass by in our own imaginations. We have heard the interviews of those who passed by during that final week. Take Judas. Was Jesus really nothing as he passed by him to forget how he called out the hypocrisy of religion? Was his memory so short that he would trade Jesus into those same hypocritical priests just for a bag of money? Jesus was really admired by men like Judas and Pontius Pilate. Admired, but not quite enough. When you pass by today, on this day of all days, confronted by the one man who could say, look and see if there is any sorrow like my sorrow, do your thoughts turn to admiration? Is that as far as you get? Or like the other members of our little cast, are words like misunderstood, strange, and denied closer to your experience of the figure of Jesus? For others, this scene is a lot more troubling. Did you see how Peter and Mary were far more conflicted as they passed by themselves? Peter recognised that we can save our own skins in that moment, while for Mary it is clear we did not know what to do with a love like this, so we destroyed it. These witnesses may have passed by, but for them it was not nothing to them. Rather, it was all too much for them. They may have been complicit to all that had happened, but their inner conflict tells us that a relationship with Jesus is more complex. Even though you passed by today, was that your experience too? You care deeply for the pitiful figure hanging on that tree. But what could you do? What courage might you have mustered to speak out against what you saw? In the language of Narnia, C.S. Lewis teaches us there is a deeper magic going on here. The Bible tells us that God made him who had no sin to be sin for us. Karl Barth, who is perhaps the most significant Christian writer of the 20th century, regarded this as almost unbearably severe. It is hard enough to imagine the scene of Good Friday through fickle human eyes. But what did God see that was happening to Jesus? God knew that Jesus' whole life was focused down to this single act of giving up his own life because of God's enormous love for each and every one of us. All those passing bys of our human frailty, our willful denial, our sinful disobedience to God were met and satisfied and forgiven if we should just turn to this Jesus who asks that single question of us. Is it nothing to you, all who pass by? Look and see if there is any sorrow like my sorrow, which is brought upon me, which the Lord inflicted on the day of his fierce anger.